late. Okay. Yeah. Oh, good. Hi, Chris.
Alec, how are you?
Yeah, I can hear you nice and clear. Fine, man. How are you?
Good.
Okay. Biden to propose 1.8 trillion families plan, tax increases. New spending on childcare education. Okay. Okay.
How's it, Chris? How you doing?
Good, Justin.
Lekker, man. How's your long weekend?
Yeah, it was very nice. Yourself?
Yeah, no, nice and relaxed. Thank you.
Okay, I've got everything ready here now. All good. FANG. How's that for a cool abbreviation? FANG. But it isn't a FANG. It's called Diamondback Energy Inc.
Isn't
I think it's a FANG stock, but it's not. S&P 500 stocks. It's had a good day today, that one. Okay, right. Market data home. Okay. Textainer. Exaro. Did that go ex-dividend?
Ex-dividend, yeah. And they paid a special dividend. Alec, just with regards to Revigo, because now their listing's been pulled, we can't actually say anything because they're going to release a SENS tomorrow morning. So about the listing specifically.
Okay.
So we're just going to have to talk. It's going to be quite hard because the reason we have them on is because they're
going to list.
Yeah.
Is it being pulled?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is this a regular kind of thing, Chris?
What?
I've never heard of one being pulled before.
No, I mean, be interesting to know why.
I think those details we'll probably find out in the SENS this evening or tomorrow morning.
So are we ready to go? Hello, Irnest.
Hello, Alec. Can you hear me?
Yeah, nice and clear. Yeah, I like your headset there, man. It's very smart.
I've got a fancy headset for a fancy show. Hi, Chris. How are you, man?
Good.
The last time I saw you was at that conference of Anthony Clark's in Cape Town.
Yeah, no.
Mount Nelson. Do you remember?
That's right.
Yeah. But I watch you. I see what you're saying every now and then. You're revving everybody up. It's great.
Okay, we're ready to go. Stand by.
Stand by. Business Power Hour starts in 25 seconds. Fifteen seconds. 10 seconds.
The BizNews Power Hour.
Welcome to the BizNews Power Hour, where we give you the rational perspective on business news that matters. And tonight we got a cracking story for you. Mike Lomas, you might remember, our guest co-host tonight, Chris Logan. Chris, you'll remember Mike Lomas, the CEO of Group 5.
Yes.
He was arrested last week on 745 million rand corruption at the Kusile plant. Now, how amazing is that? Going to be extradited to South Africa to face the music here. He's got to be by far the biggest fish caught up, certainly the biggest private sector fish caught up in the corruption net thus far. We'll be hearing from Paul O'Sullivan on how Lomas got himself into such an awful tangle. And I think it was a big shock when I heard it for the first time on Thursday that he was in the magistrate's court in Westminster. Well, he's coming here. Paul will have that story for us. And then my favorite tech analyst, Irnest Kaplan, is with us. Irnest, it's good to have you on the show tonight.
Thanks, Alec. Lovely to be here with you.
Because it's right in the middle of earnings season in the United States. We had some more numbers coming out today from Spotify. We've had Alphabet. We've had Microsoft, Netflix last week. So lots happening there. It's moving share prices quite dramatically as a consequence of what these companies are doing. And Irnest will be able to give us the inside track on what we should be buying and not. We'll also be talking to Reyburn Hendricks, who's the chief executive of Revigo, a renewable energy company that is heading for the JSE at some point in the future. And then Chris, our guest market commentator, will be talking us through Distell, which is one of the companies that has defied all the odds. Lockdown or not, it's up 65%. But first, before we get into the pretty heavy program we've got for you tonight, our editor-at-large, Jackie Cameron, has got the flash briefing.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has acknowledged to the people of South Africa that state capture took place under the ANC, but he insisted that the vast majority of ANC leaders, members and cadres are vehemently opposed to corruption in all its manifestations. Ramaphosa said this at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into Corruption. The South African president also said in his testimony that other political parties are also guilty of deploying their own in key positions. Take a listen.
And this, Chairperson, is not unique only to the ANC. If you were to look at what has also happened to other political parties, and I can think of alongside, say, the ANC, like the Democratic Alliance, they do have that as well. They do, in the end, get approval process for the appointment of people from the party, as alluding to the fact that the deployment committee in other organizations is there, even if they may not call it that. And I guess the ANC, in its exuberance, has gone ahead to say, we will call it a deployment committee. And yet in other cases, it happens as it happens. I know, for instance, and I've referred to it in my affidavit, that even in other countries, I know, for instance, with the UK, particularly under Margaret Thatcher, the question used to be asked, is that person one of us? And there's even a book written to that effect, one of us. And what that meant was, even in her governance of the UK, they always sought to find people who were one of them. And so this is not unique to the ANC.
Under mounting criticism for dominating vaccine resources, the US says it will help India by sending items needed to manufacture vaccines as part of an aid package. European countries are also pledging help as new cases in the South Asian country smash world records. The moves, says Bloomberg, show a growing realization that the vaccine nationalism many wealthy nations have embraced has the potential to backfire and prolong the global pandemic. South Africa plans to buy Russia's Sputnik 5 vaccines and shots developed by China's Sinopharm as it steps up efforts to tackle the coronavirus. Health Minister William Kize told lawmakers in Cape Town on Wednesday that the government will order 10 million doses of each shot. He says, we are doing this now because we do expect the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority to approve those vaccines. South Africa is the nation that's been hardest hit by the pandemic on the continent. It resumed its administration of Johnson & Johnson vaccines to healthcare workers on Wednesday after putting their use on hold for 2 weeks because of concerns that they could be linked to blood clots. Mango Airlines, the low-cost arm of state-owned SAA, was forced to suspend all flights after missing payments to the country's airports regulator. The carrier's senior management is in emergency discussions with the government about finding a solution, Mango tweeted on Wednesday. Bloomberg says the company owes an unspecified amount to Airports Company South Africa, which owns and manages hubs including Johannesburg and Cape Town. South African retailer Pepkor says half-year earnings are expected to rise by 20%. This is supported by growth at its discount clothing business and a reduction in net debt and finance costs. South African clothing retailers have been hit as a second wave of COVID-19 infections and job losses constrain discretionary spending. But, says Reuters, Pepkor, which is majority owned by Steinhoff, is faring better than others with its focus on budget-conscious consumers, including more than 17 million South Africans on welfare and special COVID-19 grants. And that was your BizNews Flash Briefing. I'm Jackie Cameron for BizNews. For more on those stories, you go to biznewsradio.com.
You're listening to the BizNews Power Hour, brought to you by the team at biznews.com. Chris Logan, that's a slippery Cyril Ramaphosa. Jeepers. I mean, CADA deployment. Oh, yeah, everyone in the world does it. Come on. They don't steal.
Not everyone has a 32% unemployment rate.
Extraordinary. Extraordinary. But I suppose it's the worldview. You know, it's the worldview he has. Well, Maggie Thatcher did it. So what did Maggie Thatcher do? I'm pretty sure she didn't inject members of the Conservative Party into major operations in the
obviously the 15-month will only come up at the end of June.
I tell you what, do you want to just mute?
Based on those.
Mute. There we go. Thank you. Irnest, something was coming through on your computer there. Chris, anyway, we'll deal with that in due course. But let's find out now what the markets have been doing. And BrightRock believes that with every change in life comes opportunity, and the markets aren't any different. The daily movements in the markets mean change for us all, sometimes small, sometimes big. This daily market report is made just for you by BrightRock, the first ever needs-matched life insurance that changes as your life changes. My colleague Justin Rowe-Roberts is on the markets.
Lots to digest after the long weekend, Alex. Starting with the JSE All Share Index up at 67,800. Earnings season in the US. Let's take a look at what the numbers look like. Tesla beat earnings expectations and increased revenues by 74% year on year. Tesla sold 10% of its stake in Bitcoin, generating $100 million in profit. As Musk stated, it was to demonstrate the liquidity of the token. Tesla shares are down 6% this week. Google smashed earnings expectations by 70%, reporting earnings per share for the quarter of $26. The shares have risen by 4.5% in New York in the morning session. Alphabet generated $55 billion in free cash flow for the quarter. They've announced a $50 billion share buyback program, and they've got $136 billion in cash on the balance sheet. Incredible numbers. Microsoft also beat expectations. Despite the share trading 3% weaker this morning, it begs the question what these estimates mean if the market shrugs it off as it has with Tesla and Microsoft. The mother of all margin calls strikes again, with UBS reporting a $750 million hit due to the Archegos demise. The Swiss lender said that it was not material, hence the delay in announcing. If a 10 billion rand hit isn't communicated to shareholders, what other once-off losses are shrugged off under the carpet? On the JSE, Sasol up 12 rand to 250 rand a share. Redefine up 7% to 4 rand 50. Capitec up 100 rand to a shade under 1,500 rand a share. And WBHO down 1% to 114 rand a share after the company announced that the PIC has increased its stake in the business to 25%. This is usually a leading indicator that the shares have peaked. In the currency markets, the rand was weak against all the major currencies to 14 rand 28 to the dollar, 19 rand 90 to the sterling, and 17 rand 29 to the euro. Gold is down at $1,774 an ounce. Brent crude is trading at $67.60 a barrel, and the premier cryptocurrency will put you back 780,000 rand a Bitcoin.
That's nasty that the PRC buys something and the shares have peaked. Well, I suppose they did invest in Iqbal Survey.
They violate the fundamental rule of finance that's buy low and sell high. They do the opposite, Alec.
25% is quite a serious slug of a company, a listed company. Chris, it brings in all kinds of connotations, doesn't it, once you get above 25%?
Sure. It's almost unhealthy, I think, but there's a tremendous concentration in the local market. So, and it's unfortunate that the guys like the PRC keep getting bigger. In some ways, it's just reflecting that the government sector is getting bigger.
Chris, we're getting a loop coming through. Have you got something going on in?
No.
Okay, we'll have a look on our side to see what's happening here in the next couple of minutes. But, well, let's get on to that first of the discussions today, and that's with Irnest Kaplan, who is the founder and chief executive of Kaplan Equity Analysts. Before we get there, this market report was made just for you by BrightRock, the first ever needs-matched life insurance that changes as your life changes. Irnest, if you don't mind, I'm going to actually have a look at the tech and try and sort this out. I had a really good interview with Brad Barrett, who is a rugby superstar, but many South Africans don't really know him because he left the country as a young man when he was 21 years old. And here's a little clip on why he came back to South Africa. In other words, swam against the tide. Let's have a listen. Coming back to South Africa, that's very much swimming against the tide nowadays, where it seems every second person who has the means would rather be living somewhere else in the world. What motivated your decision?
You know what it is? I think for many people, they always perceive the grass to be greener on the other side. However, I've lived in the UK for 5 years with kids, having now been back for 5 months. You still really have to be so appreciative for all the incredible things we have in South Africa. Not just the people, the friendly, the warmness, the outgoing nature of most South Africans, but the climate, amazing food and culture and things to do in this country is truly unsurpassed by any country I've been to. So to have the opportunity to bring my 2 young boys up in South Africa, I think my son's now doing more extramurals in a week than he used to do in the UK in a year. So getting them to live the lifestyle I was afforded as a young boy has been a dream come true for my wife and I, and we haven't looked back since.
Your wife, is she from this country?
Yes, we met in Durban. We started dating before I went to the UK. She finished her English communications and media degree and joined me later on, about 18 months after I left for the UK. And then our 2 sons, Leo and Noah, were born in London in 2015, and our second was born in the heat of lockdown in April last year.
You're listening to the BizNews Power Hour, brought to you by the team at biznews.com. Nice little story that, isn't it, Irnest, to hear of somebody who literally is a superstar in the UK. Anywhere he walks around there, he gets asked for autographs and adulation, etc. And here he comes back home to South Africa to pursue his entrepreneurial endeavors, including a fintech company. So it's right up your street as well. But we won't talk too much about Brad Barrett. We'll talk more about what's going on Wall Street today. I see Microsoft, the reaction was very negative. The share's down by 3%, whereas Alphabet, the reaction the other way around. Sorry, Irnest, we got you now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Super.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, I mean, when one tries to look at the reaction of these stocks on a daily basis, especially around earnings time, I think they go a little bit crazy, because in the week before the earnings come out, you get a lot of, updates and things like that. The share moves a lot, and then on the day of the results, you get a lot of people that sort of say, okay, right, we're going to take our profits and off we go. And then I think a lot of longer term shareholders look at these movements and say, but how on earth could the share go down if the results were so good? So I think, from my side, looking at it more from a long term perspective, and I think the results of certainly Alphabet, Google, and Microsoft are certainly on track for long-term shareholders. I don't think there's anything in their results that people would be upset about.
And this whole antitrust potential coming out of a Biden White House and a Democratic-controlled Congress, is that something that we should be paying more attention to?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I'm not an expert in that, Alec, and I'm not going to claim to know what the outcome of that would be. I just get the sense that, the US at this point, my feeling personally is I don't think they would cripple all their top companies. I mean, if you look at the big companies that we're talking about here, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and Facebook. I mean, these are pretty much the largest companies in the world, and they impact on a global scene. So I think that there is case to regulate certain aspects of them, but I can't see them just crushing them totally. That's just my personal view.
It was a long report, I think 450 pages, that was compiled by a Democrat-dominated antitrust committee. They spent a lot of time looking at it. They brought it to Congress, or released it in Congress last year when Trump was still the president, and it didn't get anywhere. But there has been discussions about it being resuscitated. We're also seeing the antitrust discussions in China, where they are applying antitrust issues, forcing Tencent to accept products from Alibaba and Baidu and vice versa. So there's a move in this respect, which almost like the politicians don't like the fact that these tech companies are getting that substantial. But for the moment, you say nothing really to worry about from investors' perspective.
Yeah, look, I mean, let's just also put it in perspective here. I don't think all of the success of these companies is because they've been unfairly anti-competitive or things like that, or they total monopolies. I think there's certain parts of their business which perhaps have pushed things a little bit too far. And perhaps those areas need to be reined in a little bit. But I mean, it's not going to crush these companies, in my view. I think what's more important, Alec, if we look at the so-called FANGs or the large companies like Microsoft and Google, and I think tomorrow we have Apple and Facebook, and the next day we've got Amazon. I mean, if you just look at Microsoft, what they're saying, their CEO, Satya Nadella, who's, by the way, fantastic CEO from inside the group and a fantastic technologist, saying that this whole digital transformation hasn't slowed down. And in fact, it's actually accelerating. And, I think COVID, what that's done is it's really sort of forced companies to get more digital and get their act together when it comes to all these things. And so I think, it's a very positive thing for companies like Microsoft, because everyone then wants to rely on best of breed technologies, and who better to trust than somebody like Microsoft, who's been there all along. I'm not saying they're the best in everything, but I think it just helps them hugely. And when you look at their results, I mean it's actually staggering, Alec. Just look at Microsoft. Their revenue was up 19%. Their operating profit was up 31%. I mean, that's phenomenal for a business of that size. And what's really driving Microsoft is inside there, they've got that Azure, which is their whole cloud initiative. It's basically them and Amazon's AWS, and then Google's GCP is a smaller third place, but it's the two of them that are the biggest. And that thing's growing at 50%. And it's really powering Microsoft. They've got a few other areas that are doing very well, like gaming, etc. But I think Microsoft's the kind of stock you can buy now and just keep it for the next 10 years. You'll probably do very well.
Ernest, as you're saying, incredible numbers by Microsoft, beating expectations by 20%, the share down 3%. Is that Wall Street saying that the sell-side analysts are too conservative? These expectations are an average of the Wall Street sell-side, and is that the market just saying that those estimates were too conservative, or what's happening in the price action there?
To honestly say, I don't know. I don't know why it's down 3%, and I wouldn't even want to try and say I could track these things on a daily basis. But what I will point out is if you look at Microsoft and you go back maybe just a few weeks, sorry, I was on the wrong one here. Let's look at Microsoft. You go back a few weeks, they were at like 220, and they went up to 260 over the last sort of month. So, a lot of that's kind of baked in, maybe a little bit too much, and now it kind of comes off a few percent. So I don't think, I think one's got to look at these things on a longer term basis. It's pretty much doubled since the COVID bottom.
Chris?
So that's quite amazing.
From your side, I know you've been watching these numbers as well, no doubt, because the whole world is. Is there anything that stood out for you, or do you want to pose something to Irnest?
No, I think Irnest is, just highlighting how these things just keep growing, and they're almost sucking everyone in. I know I spent part of my morning looking at, updating my Microsoft subscription just to remain, half competitive. So, yeah.
When they moved to that 365, in other words, the automatically updated subscription, we put it into our portfolio, our BizNews portfolio, and my goodness, has it been a great performance since then.
And Alec, wasn't this a conversation we're having the other day? We're talking about bubble, where we are in the territory, and an analyst was saying that big tech isn't necessarily in a bubble. The FANGs, they're still creating exponential earnings, 20% plus. It's more that emerging tech that are still going through the J curve. They're still losing money before they'll become profitable, those companies.
Exactly. That's exactly what the story is that the Ray Dalio's bubble indicator says that tech generally and the major stocks are not overpriced, but it's the little ones. It's the emerging tech stocks. It's the favorites of Cathy Woodard ARC that have got to a level that the expectations are really out of the ballpark. But before you go, Irnest, the two of you, I'd love to hear you and Chris, because Chris likes looking for undervalued situations. And we've seen EOH come down, a South African company, come down from, was it 197% anyway? And it's now bumping around. It was below 8 Rand last week. Is it something that you're looking at now? Would you consider it? Or would you say to someone like Chris Logan, hey, go and do your homework on this one because it could be a goodie? Or are you still nervous?
Look, there's probably, I would say in short and bottom line, there's probably some upside with EOH. But there's still a lot of question marks on the longer term picture, because for EOH to do well over the next, say, 5 years or 3 years, they're going to have to grow their top line, and they're still busy cutting that business down. So there's no real indication yet of of that. So you might be able to make some kind of adjustment to more sort of realistic valuation, maybe from 8 to 10 or something like that. But I'm talking about like a big thrust from 10 to 30 or 40. It's going to take a whole new strategy, and I don't think they actually have communicated any of that yet, and I don't think the current management are in a position to convince the market yet of that. So we just got to wait and see, really.
Irnest, last question from my side. The Adapt IT huge group Valaris saga, what's your take?
I think it's a very exciting one for Adapt IT shareholders because now they've got options, I guess. I do think it probably, it's a very difficult one because when you go with huge, you can continue to benefit from further upside. When you go with Valaris, you're just getting cash and you have to go away. And that cash offer of theirs at 6.50 Rand does seem a bit low, to be honest. It seems like it should be more like 8, 9, 10 Rand sort of thing, not not R6.50, because what they want to do with it over the next 5 years or so is to turn that whole thing around and do very well with it. So yeah, I'm kind of like, if Valoris could offer more, I would say go with that.
Chris, before we pick up with Paul O'Sullivan on that Mike Lomas story, EOH, have you followed that at all?
I haven't really, Alec, but my gut feel would be there's a lot of value lurking around on the JSE. The problem is, whether we like it or not, JSE companies have got the slur of the figures often not being reliable because of all these crises or scandals, and you really need to do your homework. But I definitely think there's a lot of value. Adaptite shown it. I think it's up at now at 690 bid. It's way above the 650. And, I'll remind you that Karoo's up another 6% tonight to $41.50. So it's nearly 50% above its NASDAQ IPO. Unfortunately, the one thing I've realized, there's a slur of being a JSE company. And the work I'm just doing at the moment, guess what? The JSE itself, JSE Limited, is the worst performing stock exchange and the worst rated stock exchange in the world that I can find over the last 5 years. Wow. So anyone to lose value, despite this tremendous exuberance in financial markets, the JSE Limited is down over 5 years. And that tells you something, because exchanges are, high quality operations. So, if that's happened to JSE Limited, and obviously there's a number of reasons, you can rest assured it impacted CarTrack, which we know it did, and it's impacting EOH. So, it's a huge amount of work to work through this stuff and dig through and, find out a true value. And maybe the value, you've got to go to a different exchange to crystallize it.
Well, some sobering words there from Chris Logan, our guest co-host tonight. I think we'll have a similar insight now from Paul O'Sullivan, the ace sleuth, who joins us on the phone. Paul, Mike Lomas came into our studios numerous occasions in times gone by as a leader and upstanding member of the South African business community. He was in court on Thursday in London, in Westminster, at the Westminster Magistrates Court, in connection with a 750 million rand corruption issue that you know all about that happened at Kusile Power Station. It was a surprise to most South Africans that Mike Lomas has been dragged into it. Was it a surprise to you?
No, not really. We'd interviewed him last year. I think it was actually the year before last. I flew to London. I met with him in November 2019, and he unpacked everything for us. I don't want to say anything that's going to prejudice his trial, but clearly he had a lot to say regarding Trindade and the other people, including Abraham Masango at Eskom.
Trindade, just explain that connection.
Okay, so Trindade used to work for Group 5. Trindade left Group 5, I think, in or about 1998. At that stage, Mike Lomas would have been the group CEO of Group 5, and he remained the group CEO until 2007, when he sold his share options and, I suppose, took early retirement.
And Trindade crossed swords with one Paul O'Sullivan. If I recall, it came out into the public in December, but there was quite a lot of difficulties you had to go through as a consequence.
Well, it's become the modus operandi of a lot of these people involved in corruption, is that when they come onto my radar screen, they try and get me off their radar screen, normally with applications for interdicts and stuff like that. He used the proceeds of crime to hire lawyers that were, shall we say, flexible enough to come and attack me. And they did that. And I think a month or 6 weeks later, Trindade was arrested and charged with the corruption which we had investigated and opened a docket against him a year earlier.
So there's a relationship going back some years between Trindade and Mike Lomas. Lomas presumably would have been fully aware of what Trindade was doing by bribing people at Eskom on the Kusile plant.
Well, I think what happened was Trindade left Group 5 in 98, and he started a company which became a group of companies then. We call it the Tubular Group, for want of a better expression. And in 2008, which was 10 years after he'd left Group 5, he contacted Mike Lomas and asked him to come on board as a consultant, which Mike Lomas did. And he acted as a consultant for a number of years. And during that period, I suppose, there were issues at Kusile Power Station, which were a mixture of engineering and contractual issues. And Mike Lomas assisted in sorting some of those out.
What is that euphemism for?
Well, for example, Trindade's group didn't have proper BEE, which they were supposed to have. So Mike Lomas was able to help them put their BEE in place. And he was able to sort out some of the technical issues. You know, Mike is a very competent engineer, and he was able to help sort out some of their technical issues. He described, when I met with him, he described Trindade as a micromanager. And then he reached a point where the people at Eskom needed, quote unquote, financial assistance. And Mike Lomas got drawn into that. And I think that's where he crossed the line.
He's been granted bail of £100,000. That's not an insignificant number. And he had to put up a surety of £250,000. Now, you translate that into rands, and you're talking about 6 million rands after the, just not to be behind bars in the UK. The NPA says this is the first step in extraditing the guy to South Africa. Why has he not been, why did he talk to you but not talk to the NPA? Because the NPA say he's not collaborating with the South African officials.
Yeah, I think he got bad advice in the UK. So when I started talking to him, he was very cooperative. In fact, we took a detailed sworn statement and we passed it on to the NPA. In fact, we passed it on to the SIU. They'd been investigating him for a while. So we then managed to get all of his bank statements, which he gave us a power of attorney to go to the bank and get them. And we did an analysis on the bank statements and we passed all that information on as well. And in the sworn statement he made, he undertook to cooperate with the investigation and to provide the necessary evidence. So about 3 or 4 months later, he suddenly did a U-turn, and we instructed on his behalf. Actually, he instructed the lawyer. He instructed a local lawyer. We gave him a recommendation of a decent lawyer, which was Daryl Furman at Daryl Furman Associates. And Daryl started to represent him. And the next thing, he suddenly terminated his relationship with us and with Daryl Furman and said he wanted to do his own thing. And I think the lawyers that he hired in the UK probably told him, sit tight and it will go away, which it obviously hasn't.
Wow, that's a high-risk strategy. I guess if you had a choice between being in jail in South Africa and being in jail in the UK, it's not really that difficult to pick the better.
Well, yeah, we I've since communicated with him and I've told him that, listen, I'm still confident that you're going the wrong way about this, and what you should actually be doing is tendering your cooperation and voluntarily returning to South Africa to give evidence. And if you volunteer to come back and you come of your own steam, you're not going to sit in a prison while you're waiting for the trial. And you can probably, I mean, he's no spring chicken anymore. He's 72 years old. He would probably have been able to negotiate, which was my suggestion to him, that he should try and negotiate some sort of a plea bargain in terms of which he gets to suspend the sentence and maybe a fine, and then assist in the prosecution of the others. He's elected to go his own route, and good luck to him. I think he will be extradited. And then when he's brought back, not under his own steam, he will have to sit probably in a South African jail waiting for the trial.
And you've been in a South African jail. Not a happy place, not a pleasant place to be.
Yeah, but of course I've been there for, not for breaking the law, but for investigating corruption. So I was arrested by dirty cops and I was detained unlawfully and, tortured, the whole works.
Paul, it's a very strange story. Here you've got a guy who's 70, as you say, 72 years old. He has, many people in South Africa would have looked up to him. Certainly at the time when he was CEO of Group 5, it was a major company, good performing company. And now he's got himself involved in something where he's really seems, from what you've told us, he did have an out after participating in bribery and corruption, but he's decided to risk not being extradited. The whole thing smacks of
I think just to clarify, he didn't necessarily have the out. My suggestion was that he negotiate the out, and before that process was completed, he decided to fire his attorney in Johannesburg and to sever communications with us and go his own route. So he would have. I mean, I just put myself in the shoes of a prosecutor. In a complex corruption investigation, it's very useful to have somebody. I mean, if we compare, for example, the Celebi investigation, we had a person that could have been prosecuted for corrupting Jackie Celebi, which was Glenn Agliotti. He decided to come clean and avoid prosecution himself. Now, I'm pretty certain that a 72-year-old gentleman who's not in good health would be able to negotiate such a deal for himself as well. But he's elected to bite the bullet and hope for the best. I imagine, he's back in court, I think, in 2 weeks' time. I imagine he's going to fight against the extradition based on his ill health.
I ask it in all sincerity: is he demented? Is he of sound mind, and is he thinking clearly? Because it doesn't sound like it.
Well, I think he's just got bad advice. He's an engineer. He's not a lawyer. And I think he's just got bad advice in the UK. And perhaps in the cold light of day, he may change his mind. But it will be too late to change his mind when they get him extradited. So, the boat will have left without him. And he will have to go back to South Africa under force. And then it's extremely unlikely that he'll be granted bail.
And he likely will be made an example of, given this country's focus on fighting corruption.
Well, if you look how the wind has changed direction in South Africa, we've got a very competent head of the National Prosecuting Authority who's appointed a very competent, or the president has appointed a very competent head of the Investigative Directorate, the ID as they call it. And there's no doubt in my mind that the investigation is rock solid. We've got his bank statement, so we've seen all the transfers that took place. Trindade clearly thought, rather than pay the bribes himself in the early days, he'll use somebody else's bank account to do it. And Mike Lomas, unfortunately, was the person that went along with it.
Chris Logan, this is a crazy story, isn't it? You just can't believe someone would go from mahogany row of a major corporate to get themselves involved in this kind of skullduggery.
Absolutely. And, unfortunately, as I say, it seems to happen time and time again in our neck of the woods. And it's always great shock. Steinhoff, Tongard, what we're hearing now. It's just very sad. And obviously, this is part of the reason why the JSE has this discount. You don't have this level of lack of integrity in other global markets. Very sad.
It doesn't help that Group 5 itself has now gone bankrupt some time after Mike Lomas was there. But you got to think that a leopard doesn't change its spots overnight. Or does it, Paul O'Sullivan? Would Mike Lomas have been above board while he was running Group 5?
One would hope so. I think he got himself into a corner, and he made a mistake, and it was a criminal mistake. And once he was in, he was in. His bank account was used multiple times for payments, and unfortunately, that leaves him holding the baby. Now, a short while ago, while I was waiting for the call, I was listening to the mention of EOH. We flagged EOH several years ago. We went and met with the then CEO, chap called Sinead, I can't remember his surname. We met with him and we pointed out to him that he had directors that when we flagged the fact that they were involved with FDA, they owned, in fact, FDA, we flagged over R1 billion in suspicious transactions with the South African Police Service. And at the time that we flagged those transactions, some of the directors of EOH exercised share options and sold shares. And several weeks later, they had a 35 or 40% crash in their share price. So we saw that as unethical.
Indeed, it was. Irnest Kaplan, it's interesting. EOH it had a smell for a long time, didn't it? Before things were uncovered by people like Paul and others.
Oh, look, Alec, I mean, the thing with EOH was that the results were just so good. 30% plus growth every year, year in, year out. So, I think people would never have thought that, there could be some, skeletons behind the closet there. And yeah, look, all credit to the current new CEO. He's doing a great job trying to, weed out all the bad eggs and put the company back on a sound footing. The problem is that it's still got that reputation now that, a lot of clients probably get a bit nervous. I think most of their clients are okay, and he's restored a lot of that, but it still has a strange sort of sound to it, I guess.
You're listening to the BizNews Power Hour, brought to you by the team at biznews.com. Well, after all of that, you almost hesitate to welcome Reyburn Hendricks. You know the company, Justin.
Did my due diligence this morning, Alec. Very interesting. Great to have you with us, Reyburn. So Revigo, tell us more about the company ahead of its IPO or delayed IPO now, as we've been told.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the time. Much appreciated. My name is Reyburn Hendricks. I'm the CEO of Revigo Africa Energy Limited.
Reyburn, we know all that, but just get into answer the question, please.
Sure. Okay. So Revigo is an investment vehicle. It's a limited partner in a fund which will invest in predominantly equity stakes in operational renewable energy projects in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a yield focused vehicle. It's also a BE investment vehicle, and we're looking to play our part in the green revolution going forward, as well as to be an attractive investment vehicle for investors out there in the market.
Reyburn, let's get straight into it. I was looking at the numbers today, yielding 8 to 10%. Of course, you'll get some funds from the IPO, but how do you plan to fund growth, yielding 8 to 10%, basically paying out all your earnings?
Yeah. So the idea. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with yield curves. Revigo will actually be Africa's first listed yield curve, in our view. What the structure of a yield curve is, it's an investment vehicle which is designed to give investors stable and predictable cash flows, very similar to a REIT in some instances. So what we are looking to do is pass through all the cash flows which are received from the underlying projects to shareholders on a semi-annual kind of basis. How we look to grow that portfolio is to the extent that the fund manager finds additional attractive investment opportunities and which pass all the governance structures. We look to place place additional shares in the market, either through a book build or a rights issue or a vendor placing. So that's the primary instrument or mechanism by which we look to grow, is by looking to place additional shares out there in the market. once we find additional new investments.
And then Reyburn, I see you got 6 assets in South Africa. You guys are looking to branch out into sub-Saharan Africa. I don't have enough fingers on my hand for the number of JSE companies that have gone to sub-Saharan Africa and failed. What makes Revigo any different?
No, it's a good point. The reason we mention that is that there is a electricity revolution going on in the world, and definitely on the continent. We are looking to participate in that sector in sub-Saharan Africa. The reason why we think it'll be different is that we'll always be looking to deal with credit-worthy counterparties. So, to the extent that that's not fulfilled, we won't be making those investments. And what it needs is we'll need some sort of government guarantee or DFI guarantee needed to make those investments creditworthy. Just although sub-Saharan Africa is an investment mandate, when you look at the numbers, all the action in the short to medium term will be in South Africa. The South African Renewable program can dominate the whole of the African continent by size. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but there's been approximately 6,400 megawatts which have been contracted in South Africa from rounds 1 through 4. We've just had another 2,000 megawatts under this emergency risk program, which was recently announced, and the long-term energy plan for the country calls for another 20,000 megawatts of renewable. So, I think most of the action in the short to medium term will be in South Africa, but to the extent we find attractive investment opportunities outside of South Africa, then we'll look to do it.
That's an interesting approach, because we're all grown-ups here, and in many parts of Africa, renewable energy has actually been banned because there's not enough in it for the people who are governing those countries. So I'd love to know which countries, and there's not enough in it because they can't get the bribes, i.e. Jacob Zuma and his pals wanted nuclear because it was R1 trillion, of which they would have skimmed off big numbers. I'd love to know which countries, if any, you can tell us about who aren't going that route. In other words, where you will be able to participate. Because many South Africans, despite the track record that we've got, which isn't that great, but still see opportunity in Africa, which it surely is, if you can just get over this hurdle of having to cross palms with silver.
Sure. Okay. So, like many of the jurisdictions that I'm referring to, government program in place, and linked to that government program, because many of the African countries are not entirely bankable, or the utilities are not bankable by themselves, have a DFI this is an organization like the World Bank or the IFC there, who provide a guarantee. In order to get that guarantee, those programs need to comply with a variety of things, such as Equator principles, but very many anti-corruption guidelines. So by participating in these programs, you kind of get out of that realm of the corruption cycle that you mentioned. Specifically, there's a number of programs.
What countries? What countries are you comfortable doing business in?
So the ones which have programs underway at the moment, it's Namibia, Malawi, Zambia, Kenya. Those countries have existing programs in place and have actually completed requests for proposals, and have gone through the bidding and the financial close process. We expect there to be many more, but then again, they need to be compliant with well-established global governance standards around that.
I think that's a big warning for everybody else. Unless you've got a DFI or a global multinational like a World Bank and a International Finance Corporation, be very, very wary. Chris, as our guest co-host, any thoughts that you'd like to ask on this new listing?
Well, conceptually, it sounds the right thing. I mean, I did quite a lot of work on sort of Eskom in the past, and I know South Africa is classed as potentially what they call a renewable energy superpower. By that, they mean the quality of our natural resource, be it wind or solar, if it was properly managed, we'd be a renewable energy superpower. And the potential from this is vast, because if you lower your energy costs, all types of industries come to you. And in something like Australia, they're even exporting renewable energies, be it solar, through a cable to Singapore. So there's vast potential, and it's good to see guys like Reyburn start getting a bit of movement there, because we need movement. Not much is happening. So, I don't know the detail, but, from what I've heard, it's a step in the right direction, and all strength to you, Reyburn.
No, thank you. I mean, just to say, Chris, I mean, this kind of sector is a pretty niche kind of sector in terms of the number of participants. It's also not very well known to like the equity investors on the market and
Sure.
so forth. But there is a lot of movement, which is happening. There's a lot of good work which has been done by the DMRE, by the IPP office and the government. And just to reiterate, it's just sort of like the movement. This year, we've had the award of like the emergency power, like the risk mitigation IPP program, which is baseload, a dispatchable program. And 2 weeks ago, the round 5 of the Renewable IPP program was just released with the bid date at the end of August. So there's a lot of movement underway, and expect there to be much more of it going forward. And I also expect there to be, as the secondary market develops in these assets, for institutional investors to become more familiar with it and to be more exposed to these opportunities.
You're listening to the BizNews Power Hour, brought to you by the team at biznews.com. Interesting story. I like the quip that you gave there, Chris, about us South Africa being a renewable energy superpower. Certainly, is one thing we have got right was these different stages of opening up. But you do recall, it's only since Ramaphosa came back that the IPPs and the renewable energies ungridlocked, because up until that point, there was not enough money in it for the crooks. Absolutely. It's a crazy world we live in. But there has been a lot of money in booze, and you've done some work on Distell, which really makes one scratch one's head, because here's a share price up 65% during lockdown, during a period where its products much of the time was not allowed to be sold. So what are investors seeing in this company that seems to defy logic?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Alec. Well, its share price has just got back to where it was in February 2020. It fell off a cliff. It went from like 130 Rand down to 65 Rand. And it's now got back to 126 Rand, which has been an amazing performance, because over the last 9 months, they lost 36% of their trading days, being 132 days, where, government imposed ban, liquor couldn't be sold. So, and over that period, they actually managed to increase their revenue by 8%, their volumes by 6%. So it is amazing performance, which has triggered this tremendous recovery in the share. And, you need to break it down. But basically what's happened is that the resilience of their portfolio, which is broad-based, it's everything from brandy to cider to wine to champagne, has taken share from mainly beer. And also importantly, in that portfolio is some new innovative products like, alcohol-free Savannah, and then seltzers, which are growing. So they've taken big share from beer, or regained share too. And part of it is because during the lockdown, you were worried if your booze would last. And beer is, I don't know if you know, but it only has a 3-month shelf life.
I was about to say, Chris, I think I've contributed to a bit of EBITDA from Distell. but Chris, in all seriousness, going forward, how sustainable are these trends? I mean, as you're saying, taking a lot of booze back, putting it in your cupboard for long periods of time. Wines and the likes and lots of spirits can be kept for long periods of time. But when things do go back to normal and COVID-19 isn't around, which I suspect will be in the next 6 months or so, what do you think the long-term trends are for a company like Distell?
Look, that's very relevant, and that's something I think that the various Distell analysts are wrestling with. What they're going to have to do, and there are early signs, they're going to have to become a more innovative and fast-to-market company. And that there are some signs. As I say, they were quick out the blocks with alcohol-free products during the lockdown, with the seltzer, which has been taking huge share from beer in America. But we will see, because beer companies, they're big, bad gorillas, and not just beer, also something like Diageo. Diageo is 56 times the market cap of Distell. So the big companies can, of course, drop prices to regain share, and that will be the test. Distell will need to be increasingly innovative, fast to market, and driven to keep things going forward.
So would you be buying the stock now, Chris, after this big recovery? Given the other thing that I know you've done work on is that every year the government seems to just label the booze operators with more tax, more excise duty. And if they're doing that anything like petrol, that is a growing percentage of the take that the company has.
Yeah, very good point. So just specifically, excise as a percentage of Distell's revenue has increased from 16.8% in 2001 to 28.8%, which is a huge increase. In the last 6 months alone, Distell paid excise of 4.43 billion. 4.43 billion in 6 months.
That's a lot of public servants, eh? Mm.
Yeah, and they hadn't locked down the excise which they lost. I'm told could have funded the whole vaccine program just very easily. So, these are all relevant points. Once again, it's a South African company. I think the South African government has picked on its local liquor industry more than any other government in the world, without doubt, even though they're getting paid back.
4 billion rands worth. Wow. Chris Logan, thanks for being our guest co-host this evening. Irnest Kaplan, thanks for joining us as well. Before we leave, though, BrightRock believes that with every change in life comes opportunity, and the markets aren't any different. The daily movements in the market mean change for us all, sometimes small, sometimes big. This daily market report is made just for you by BrightRock, the first ever needs-matched life insurance that changes as your life changes. Justin?
Lots to digest after the weekend, Alec, but I'll keep this one a bit shorter. Starting with the JSE All Share Index up at 67,800. Earnings season in the US. Let's take a look at what the numbers look like. Tesla beat on earnings expectation and increased revenues by 74% year on year, although the shares are down 6% this week. Google smashed earnings expectations by 70%, reporting earnings per share for the quarter of $26 per share. The shares have risen by 4.5% in New York in the morning session. Microsoft also beat on expectations despite the share trading 3% weaker this morning. And the mother of all margin calls strikes again, with UBS reporting a $750 million hit due to the Archegos demise. On the JSE, Sasol up 12 Rand to 250 Rand a share, Redefine up 7% to 4.50 Rand, Capitec up 100 Rand to a share under 1,500 Rand a share, and WBHO down 1% to 114 Rand a share after the company announced that the PIC has increased its stake to 25% of the business. I won't repeat that last sentence. In the currency markets, the Rand was weaker against all the major currencies to 14 Rand 28 to the dollar, 19 Rand 90 to the sterling, and 17 Rand 29 to the euro. Gold is down at $1,774 an ounce. Brent crude is up at $67.60 a barrel. The premier cryptocurrency will put you back 780K Bitcoin.
Remember, there are always exceptions to the rule, and hopefully Wilson Bailey is one of those. Well, thanks for being with us. This market report was made just for you by BrightRock, the first ever needs-matched life insurance that changes as your life changes. We'll be back again, same time, same place tomorrow. Look forward to being in your company then. From the team here at BizNews, cheerio. You've been listening to the Power Hour, brought to you by the team at BizNews. How's it, guys? Thanks very much. That was terrific. Thanks, Irnest and Chris.
Thanks, Alec.
I
Thanks.
was all excited about EOH, man. I thought you were going to say, oh, it's getting back to 180 Rand or wherever it was, or 80
Can
Rand
you
at
believe
least,
it?
yeah?
180 Rand. It was 160 at one point, 170.
That's when the PIC bought.
You be careful there. You're going to get someone from the PRC saying, okay, Justin, now just tell us where we bought in the wrong. I think AO is the, AO was
But
the
thanks,
shocker.
Alec, and thanks, Justin. It's just with these companies, you can spend, I'm not joking, an entire day on Google's results, and you're still gonna find little things. The little snippets you see on the news highlights on the major websites. It's just a snip in the ocean. I mean, you got to listen to the earnings calls, then you got to see what comes out of it. So this is going to keep people like me busy for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
And 50 billion in a quarter. I mean, those $50 billion in a quarter profit, those are just crazy numbers for people who live in a country like ours. So basically work it out.
Yeah.
They'll make 2/3 of South Africa's GDP. Well, no, not 2/3, but certainly over half South Africa's GDP
That was
every
free
year.
cash flow.
Free cash flow.
So I think the earnings number will be a bit lower, but free cash flow 55 billion.
Okay, so take
Annualize
that.
it.
Okay, so it's 220. Our GDP was 350 before we had COVID. So, I mean, it's just a different world.
Just on a separate note, Alec, I don't know if you guys and Chris and Justin, if you saw recently, it was about a week ago, Bronwyn on Twitter posted something, and then I went and had a look at this with Amazon's investment
in Cape Town,
head office in Cape Town.
I
mean, it's also a very good thing, actually.
We did cover that story. So now you're showing that you don't read BizNews as much as you should, Ernest.
No. But what I'm saying is they've always been here with their AWS. I mean, everyone's been excited about the fact that they've got their infrastructure here. And that's been going on for a while. And Microsoft's been lagging them and came on afterwards. But now they're doing all of this. And I'm assuming, I don't know, what this means, but I mean, it's very positive for the region.
It's not just AWS, but that's the big thing.
Sure, it's the retail.
Exactly, they're going against Takealot. So I'd be worried if I was Takealot, because Takealot is not yet making money. And if they now have an Amazon in their backyard,
it's going to be very difficult for them.
Very difficult. What do you think Naspers are going to do with their South African assets? They've got them out on a limb there. They don't seem to fit that well in the group.
I don't know, Alec. I mean, I think I'm not following it closely enough, but I guess if it's immaterial, then what is the point?
Yeah, immaterial and lots of hassle. Imagine owning the biggest website in the country, and the flack you would be taking when Naspers must take from News 24, because every time they write something that's even slightly objectionable to the politicians, they would be giving Naspers gears. So I don't know. Eventually, media. I remember Johan Rupert said he didn't want to ever be invested in media. I know he's got a stake in ETV, hasn't he, Chris? Through HCR.
Indirectly.
Indirectly, but he didn't want. He always after they had that. Remember they had that mess with Nethold in Europe. And after that, he said, no more media. And you got to wonder if Naspers, who've also moved out of media everywhere else in the world, excepting here, are thinking the same thing. Anyway, it's just interesting. It's just interesting jibber jabber.
Interesting.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Justin, and thanks, Alec.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Ernest. Just Chris. Go well.
Cheers, guys.
Chris. Thanks,
Cheers,
man.
guys.
Speak
Thanks
soon.
so much.
Okay.
Cheers.
Bye then. Bye. Thank you.
take this out to do?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You walked into the door. Ah, you're both here.